All right, guys, this is Kennedy's chapters 17 and a little bit of 18 here. I'm going to take you through Manifest Destiny, Causes and Effects of the War with Mexico, how it's related to slavery and tension in the Antebellum era. So we're going to start off by going back to 1837, big year for America. You guys already know the Panic of 1837 had caused a lot of economic crisis. And so that kind of strained our relationship with England. So we saw that America was defaulting on some of their loans. And then we also saw that there were some attempts for Canada to get independence from England. And the United States was seen as supporting those attempts. And so we had some tension. The Caroline was a ship that actually went, it was an American ship, and went into Canada carrying supplies to the insurgents. And it was attacked on the New York shores. And so your book talks a lot about how there was all this propaganda that it was, basically set afire and thrown down Niagara Falls, and that actually wasn't true. It was sunk before it went down Niagara Falls. But there was an American killed there, so it was kind of something that stepped up the tension between the United States and England. 3 years later, the Creole ship, which was a ship carrying about 130 slaves that had rebelled and captured the ship, trying to get to some islands in the Caribbean because the British had offered asylum in the Bahamas to the ship if it could make it there. So that was going to, it really opened up a lot of the fears of Southerners that, oh my gosh, there's going to be a new Underground Railroad going to the Caribbean, and now we need to be worried about that. So a lot of this comes to light in the issues with the border between Maine and Canada, which again is a source of tension for Britain. They're dealing with Canada and some rebellion there. So the Webster-Ashburton Treaty, and you can see the effects of that on page 366. The Webster-Ashburton Treaty really kind of clarified that border with Maine and Canada. That's kind of when things were settled down with England. However, we are going to see tension with Spain over the Texas problem, really more with Mexico over that. So we've got, you guys know Henry Clay, the Whig, and John Tyler, who sort of became president somewhat on a fluke when William Henry Harrison died in office after about a month. Tyler was a states' rights Southerner, and Clay, of course, is not. He's a more kind of representative of the Northern Whigs, although he was from Kentucky and did own a few slaves. He did feel strongly about his federal improvement program, that American system. So Tyler is going to make a lot of enemies in his cabinet when he vetoed the new bank bill, and every single member of his cabinet resigned, except for Webster. Daniel Webster does help work out that Webster-Ashburton Treaty. So John Tyler had a lot of struggling within his own administration. So Manifest Destiny is just that term again, that it means that it's God's will. The United States will spread across the continent. This seemed to be confirmed by things like the gold discovered in California, right? Or, the land that we're going to eventually receive from the Mexican-American War. So you can just kind of see the different trails and where they were heading, and just the Western movement that's really going to start. I would say really more after the 1840s. That Panic of 1837 does a lot to slow that down, but then that'll open back up after that. So the election of 1844 really, we have to just pause for a moment and look at the glory of this mullet. This is James Polk. Okay, side note. Anyway, so the Whigs nominated Henry Clay again. Not sure why they thought that was a great idea, because we've seen this before. And they decided just to ignore the Texas issue. Because remember, Texas was its own country. It wanted to become a state. Jackson and Van Buren both kind of were waffling on that. John Tyler didn't think he had enough support to do it. So the Democrats end up splitting over Van Buren, who's going to carry more the Northern Democrats, and John Calhoun, who's going to carry, surprise, surprise, the Southern Democrats. So neither of those guys were able to get enough votes. So this guy, James Polk, kind of snuck in. He managed to get the most votes in the convention. And they call this a dark horse candidate, when someone who, seemingly comes out of nowhere somehow gets the majority. So he got the nomination. The Liberty Party is a new party that's going to be pretty much in favor of abolition. So they're going to take some votes away from the Whigs. And so that, in New York specifically, cost Clay the election. It's kind of similar in a way to what happened to Al Gore in Florida in 2000, when Ralph Nader, the third-party candidate, took some votes away that probably would have gone to Gore had he not been in the election. So it was a similar situation. So what we're going to start hearing is the Democrat slogan here is going to be 54-40 or fight. And they're talking about Oregon. So again, it's some more tension between the United States and England. And so I'm trying to find a page here. Okay, so if you look on page 371, you can see where 5440 is. I mean, it's pretty significantly into Canada today, right? We're nowhere near that today. But that was we're going to fight for this. And in the end, the Americans will basically give up on 5440 with no fight. But that was going to be the campaign slogan. So Polk figured when he got elected, he goes, oh, everyone must want to expand. And must want Texas to be a state because I got elected. So he considered that really a mandate. So he finally was the president that annexed Texas. Texas became a state, did allow slavery. So not surprisingly, Mexico was not okay with that. So we're going to see Mexico is really going to, that's what causes the Mexican-American War. So Polk had 3 goals, and they walk you through this in Chapter 17. Number 1, he wanted to lower the tariff. That got a lot of support in the South. He does accomplish this in something called the Walker Tariff that definitely upset the New England area Northeast. Number 2, restoration of an independent treasury / bring back the bank. And he got this in 1846. So that is something we saw come back. And then number 3, acquisition of California and Oregon. So we are going to see the Bear Flag Republic of California will eventually become part of the United States. And Oregon, although it's not the 5440 that they threatened to fight for, the United States and England will sort of work out a deal with Oregon to bring that into the United States. Basically, Britain didn't want to fight for it, and the United States didn't want to fight Britain. They were going to be a much harder enemy to defeat, so they just kind of worked it out. So we do see a war with Mexico, and a lot of it starts about the border disputes around the Rio Grande River. James Polk ordered the general Zachary Taylor to defend that border. They weren't sure exactly what part belonged to Mexico and what part belonged to Texas. It depended on what map you were looking at, And so Polk sent his secret envoy, John Slidell, on a secret mission here to sort of iron out that border dispute, also sort of offering the Mexicans to cancel the debt that they owed from their successful revolt against Spain in exchange for Texas. Mexico refused this. Now, in retrospect, I'm pretty sure Mexico, looking back, went, man, we should have taken that deal. Because they're going to not just lose Texas when this is all done. They're going to lose literally half their country. So that was a considerable better deal than they're going to end up with. Polk ordered Zachary Taylor to the Rio Grande, and this is going to start off some of the skirmishing, some of the fighting. And I put there, it's a relatively easy victory for the United States in the Mexican-American War. I mean, not to downplay the Americans and the Mexicans that died there. But this war was similar, I would say, for Mexico. I've read one historian said it was like their War of 1812. So whereas our War of 1812 was kind of a disaster on the battlefield, we're going to come out of that stronger, and that's what's going to happen with Mexico. They will lose a lot of land, but they will come out stronger when it's over. Results in the Mexican-American War. Zachary Taylor's going to turn political, which is kind of funny because he's a guy who will become president and freely admitted that he never voted in an election ever. So this is going to be a good example of how Americans in the antebellum years are going to really pick presidents that aren't that strong. And I feel that's a deliberate choice. They didn't want a president who was going to put their foot down and make demands. So they're going to pick the Zachary Taylors and the Franklin Pierces of the world. So some, including what we're going to see, are conscience Whigs. And Abraham Lincoln's going to sort of rise out of this faction. They're going to question Polk's motives. They're going to say, this war was fought just about slavery. This war was just about expanding slavery to the territories. And so that's going to be somewhat of the new defining rallying cry of what will become here very soon, the Republican Party. So in June of 1846, we'll see American settlers there in Sacramento raise that California flag, and by February 1847, Americans win control of all of Mexico, north of Mexico City, and Winfield Scott takes Veracruz. So it's, like I said, it's not that hard for the Americans to accomplish their goals here. And what this is, and your book kind of mentions this, it's a really bloody warm-up for the Civil War. We're going to see a lot of these names come back, John Slidell, Winfield Scott. A lot of the generals in the Civil War get their training here in almost a little dress rehearsal. So that's something that I think we're going to see. Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, there's the quote from Kennedy, blood-spattered schoolroom of the Civil War. I love that. That's a great quote. Because it's a training grounds, This was boot camp almost for what's going to happen. So Mexico doesn't just have to give up Texas, right? They give up all of this. So in retrospect, they're probably looking at that first deal going, yeah, we really should have taken that. So Mexico accepts the Rio Grande River as the border, and Upper California given to the United States, although we did pay for that in exchange. Baja, or Lower California, still belongs to Mexico today. Abolitionists are absolutely enraged by this. In fact, this is why Henry David Thoreau wrote on civil disobedience. He refused to pay his Massachusetts poll tax because he thought it was going to support this war, therefore support slavery. So he wouldn't do it, so he went to jail. And that's where he wrote on civil disobedience, where he basically explained that it is completely fine. Actually, it's your duty to ignore laws that are unjust. And that's going to inspire everybody from Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from a Birmingham jail to Mohandas Gandhi to Lech Walesa in Poland. So it's a very influential document. So William Lloyd Garrison, who we've been talking about in class, is an extremely radical abolitionist. And here's kind of summing up what a lot of people like him felt. The invasion was waged solely for the detestable and horrible purpose of extending and perpetuating American slavery. So they didn't hold back. They were very frustrated by this. So also kind of here, and I think this is in chapter 18, we're going to see that manifest destiny is going to seem to be kind of confirmed and continued and really no bounds. And this is what's going to alarm a lot of the abolitionists. So the gold rush in California is going to be something that will obviously bring a lot of population out there. But expansion doesn't just stop within what we would call the 48 contiguous United States. We're going to look overseas. The Austin Manifesto was on the table in Congress to potentially take over Cuba from the weak Spanish Empire and make it a slave state. You know, it's only 90 miles from Florida, and that was a real idea out there. And so northern abolitionists are enraged. Northern, more moderates are enraged because they know that's going to upset that balance between slave and free that they're so concerned about. William Walker was another guy who he just kind of grabbed a bunch of his Tennessee friends and these Tennessee volunteers and all went to Nicaragua, the Central American country of Nicaragua, and again tried to take it over to make it a slave state. He and every single one there were executed. So it did not end well for him, but that's another example of something that was happening that kind of made a lot of Northerners and a lot of abolitionists go, see, they'll stop at nothing. We had the Opium War that was happening between Britain and China. You might remember that from world history. But that led the United States to say, you know what, we should work on our relationship with Japan. So President Fillmore sent Commodore Matthew Perry to Japan, signed a treaty basically forcing that country to open up. And so we're going to see that also has big implications for what Japan's history is going to do next, which is rapidly modernize because they realized that they're behind. The Clayton-Bulwer Treaty of 1850 sets up the whole idea of a Panama Canal, and it's for trade, right? And so it was basically between England and the United States. It said if there ever is a canal somewhere, because they were toying with the idea of Panama or Nicaragua. That was like the other sort of logical place. When you look at a map, you'll see what I'm saying. So that said, if there ever is a canal, the United States and England will be responsible for creating it. So that's kind of a big moment there. That sets up the eventual U.S. control of the Panama Canal. And then the Gadsden Purchase is a purchase that's made in 1853, mostly, you can see right here, because it was going to be easier for Southerners to build a railroad connecting brand new Texas to brand new California, rather than go over here. There was more mountainous here. This was going to be a lot easier, so we did purchase that from Mexico. And I put best treaty ever. Okay, do yourself a favor, please, when this is done. Google Jimmy Fallon Gadsden Purchase. 5 minutes of your life, you won't be disappointed. We'll watch it in class. I'm really sad you're missing it. It's pretty hilarious. So anyway, for Northern abolitionists, Southerners really seem to have, again, no bounds. Like, they were like, they're going to take over the world, right? I mean, they're going to Cuba, they're going to Nicaragua. So this is going to be something that really steps up that tension as we approach 1850. The Compromise of 1850 is what will happen to get the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo land admitted, and that's a whole other can of worms, and that we're going to look at in a separate video because it really needs its own. It's probably one of the bigger steps taking us to the Civil War. So that walks you through chapters 17 and 18.